Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And happy Tuesday. It's July 8th, 2025. We're grateful for your listenership here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And we have another jam-packed show for you today. We're going to dive deeply into the big, beautiful bill, taking a look at it from a truly Catholic perspective, as we do all things, with our friend Lewis Brown, who's the executive director of Christ Medicus Foundation. And he's been following the developments of the legislation and also studying it. And we're going to talk about what it means for us from a pro-life perspective, of course, obviously Catholic perspective. But what are we looking at in terms of defunding Planned Parenthood? There were some concerns over the fact that in this particular measure, if I'm remembering correctly, Planned Parenthood was only going to be defunded for a year. So that is quite disappointing. But at the same time, pro-life experts are saying that it is a big step forward given what's been going on with Planned Parenthood and the billions they've been getting for so many years from our tax dollars. So we'll have two segments with Lewis, and then we're going to dive into a very interesting story that didn't get a lot of coverage. This is regarding Stanford Medicine halting sex change surgeries for minors. Now, we're seeing this happening more and more. And the secular media aren't exactly giving it a lot of coverage because they don't agree with it. But I thought it would be interesting to bring in Dr. Nathanael Blake. If you recall, we had him on a few weeks ago on his fantastic book regarding the fallout from all this sexualized liberation. He's got a book out by Ignatius Press. And I always tried to take stories from the real world to show how the church is right. And stories like this, without ever mentioning religion, prove how the church is right in terms of our teaching. We are made male and female in the image and likeness of God, and that cannot be changed. And the fallout from the sexual revolution, all this over-sexualized culture in which we've been living has just been, well, it's been devastating. And Dr. Blake documents this in his fantastic book, and we'll get his response to not only that story, but some other positive stories. For example, defunding Planned Parenthood, even if it's only for a year. Taking a look at what happened in the state of Tennessee, where the Supreme Court upheld the ban on mutilating surgeries for minors. And then the Supreme Court also upholding a big situation in the Maryland schools, allowing parents to opt out when the schools are going to be presenting some very, again, over-sexualized and highly inappropriate material for children. So these are all stories that are showing people are starting to slowly, perhaps, please God, get their common sense back, because for a long time, common sense wasn't so common, right? We'll talk about the second hour as we get closer to that point. So that is a show for the first hour today on a Tuesday, July 8th. Lewis Brown and Dr. Nathanael Blake, two wonderful, strong Catholics who know their stuff, and I always look forward to having them on. We continue to pray for the families in Texas that have been just so hurt by these flash floods. It's just heartbreaking reading some of the stories. And we have a story in our news segment this morning about a Catholic family that was greatly affected. It's just so sad. So please keep them in your prayers. Many masses are being said. Catholic Charity is down there working really hard along with other groups trying to help them. But the problem is that they're expecting the numbers to rise in terms of the number of people killed with the flash floods. Now, speaking of the weather, the National Weather Service says we still have heavy rainfall and severe thunderstorms possible. And this is actually for the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast and dangerous heat in the Southwest. We have scattered severe thunderstorms containing the potential for damaging wind gusts and excessive rainfall possible from the Midwest to southern New England today, with additional thunderstorms and heavy rain possible across the plains and middle Mississippi Valley, and then heat and humidity remain along the East Coast and interior Northwest, while the dangerous heat is continuing to build in the Southwest as well. It is a Tuesday. We're glad you're listening to Catholic Connection and EWTN production. It's 4 minutes past the hour, and we need to check the news right now on EWTN. Over 100 people are dead after massive flooding swept through central Texas. This young boy detailing when he was alerted of the danger.
It was very late at night, so we had no idea what was happening until one of our counselors ran in and just yelled at everybody to get out as fast as we could.
In Kirk County alone, officials reporting 56 adults and 28 children are dead, with 10 children and 1 adult still missing from a girls' camp. They're dead with 10 children again and 1 adult missing. Officials say hundreds of first responders are still working, though, in search and rescue operations in the area. Camp Mystic confirming at least 27 campers and counselors died in the flooding. President Trump, meanwhile, signing a major disaster declaration for that area. And 2 sisters who attended St. Rita Catholic School in Dallas were among the victims of the Texas Hill Country flash floods that have devastated, as you just heard, parts of the state, and the school confirming this in a statement over the weekend. Catholic News Agency has a full report and says Blair Herber, 13, and Brooke Harber, also her sister, 11 years old, were vacationing with their parents and grandparents on the Guadalupe River. The flash flood raised the river more than 22 feet in half an hour in the early morning hours of July 4th, dislodging and carrying away their cabin in which they were staying with their grandparents. They were discovered in Kerrville, 15 miles from the cabin community, with their hands clasped together, according to reports. Their grandparents have yet to be found. In a statement, the Catholic school said Blair and Brooke were young women of deep faith, and religion was one of their favorite subjects. On the night they died, they went to the loft of their cabin with their rosaries. Even in their last moments, they held tightly to each other, a powerful symbol of their lasting bond and their trust in God. The Archbishop of San Antonio, meanwhile, saying a memorial mass for the victims on July 6th at Notre Dame Catholic School in Kerrville. Again, President Donald Trump declared that area a disaster area on July 6th. Congressman Tony Gonzalez says the work won't stop until everyone is accounted for, but just getting to ground zero is proving to be difficult for crews. Chainsaw teams from the Texas Baptist Men are cutting through timber that was washed downstream. On top of that, they say that river levels are rising and falling as more rain is predicted upstream. A flood watch that covers yesterday, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt scolding some Democrats and the media for claiming recent cutbacks at the National Weather Service hindered warnings to people in the area.
Unfortunately, in the wake of this once-in-a-generation natural disaster, we have seen many falsehoods pushed by Democrats such as Senator Chuck Schumer and some members of the media. Blaming President Trump for these floods is a depraved lie.
Leavitt adding the weather station in that area actually had extra staff in place before the storm, and anyone, she says, who uses the issue to score political points should be ashamed. She confirmed that Trump will be in Texas this week to visit areas of the state hardest hit by the deadly flash flooding. And Scott Pringle tells us a New Jersey man is being praised for his efforts in helping rescue scores of the Texas flood victims.
U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is highlighting the effort that 26-year-old Scott Ruskin has made as a U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmer. He's from Oxford, New Jersey. She says Ruskin directly saved 165 victims in what is his first rescue mission of his career. Noem says he was the only triage coordinator at the scene and that his selfless courage embodies the spirit and mission of the Coast Guard. Scott Pringle, NBC News Radio, New Jersey.
In other news this morning, the coffin holding the incorrupt body of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati will be in Rome for veneration during the Jubilee Year of Youth, July 26th through August 4th. That's according to the Vatican's Jubilee office. As CNA explains, the coffin will be transferred from the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin in the Italian region of Piedmont to the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva in Rome. Frassati is originally set to be canonized on August 3rd during the Jubilee of Youth, will now be declared a saint by the Pope on September 7th, along with Blessed Carlo Acutis. Frassati's remains will be displayed in the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva in Rome until August 4th so that they can be venerated by young people attending events July 28th through August 3rd. And Pope Leo will celebrate the Youth Jubilee's closing Mass at a local university campus on the south outskirts of Rome. The Young Blessed's relics were also present at World Youth Day in Sydney back in 2008 at the request of George Cardinal Pell. Tammy Trujillo tells us the immigration battle between the Trump administration and California is now escalating.
Border Czar Tom Homan told reporters there are plans to flood agents into sanctuary cities like Los Angeles.
We're going to double down, triple down on sanctuary cities. Why? Not because they're a blue city or a blue state, because we know that's where the problem is.
He says there are plans to ramp up worksite raids. The Justice Department previously announced a lawsuit against Los Angeles over its sanctuary city policies. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a statement the city is flouting federal law by prioritizing illegal aliens over American citizens. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
President Trump says the U.S. will be sending more weapons to Ukraine.
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now.
He made the remarks at a White House dinner with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This comes after the administration had paused some weapon shipments to Ukraine over concerns U.S. military stockpile was being depleted. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is nominating the president for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved.
He announced again the nomination at that dinner at the White House, saying Trump is pursuing peace and security in many lands, especially in the Middle East. He told the president, again, he sent the letter to the committee and that he should win. Trump thanking the Israeli prime minister and also saying that the nomination is very meaningful coming from Netanyahu. Mark Mayfield tells us the L.A. Police Department says a ghost gun was used to injure one of its officers last weekend.
The suspect who shot an officer during a foot pursuit in Exposition Park on Saturday had a ghost gun. Ghost guns don't have serial numbers, making them nearly untraceable. Two uniformed gang enforcement detail officers believe that the man was in possession of a gun and tried to stop him for questioning, but he took off. The officer who was shot has non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect remains behind bars on $1 million bail. I'm Mark Mayfield.
There is reportedly no evidence that convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein kept a so-called client list. That's according to multiple reports that cite a memo on a review completed by the Justice Department and FBI after being ordered by President Trump. The review also confirming the disgraced financier died by suicide. Supporters of President Trump and some of his cabinet members had questioned the official story about Epstein's death in the past. Elon Musk had claimed in a post on X that Trump was in the alleged Epstein files, but later deleted it. Sean Diddy Combs' sentencing date could be moved up with the hearing later today, weighing the timeline. Last week, the rap mogul was found guilty of transporting people for prostitution, but acquitted of the more serious charges in the sex trafficking trial in New York. He remains behind bars and is set to be sentenced on October 3rd. And trash is mounting in Philadelphia. Strikes involving thousands of municipal workers now entering day 8. Some 9,000 union workers walked off the job last week, impacting trash removal and other services. And finally, in our news segment, before we take a quick break on a Tuesday morning, July 8, travelers at several major U.S. airports no longer need to remove their shoes at security checkpoints as the TSA begins testing a relaxed screening policy. An internal memo revealing the soft launch is now underway at several airports, including LAX, LaGuardia, BWI, Philadelphia, and Fort Lauderdale International. We hope you're having a beautiful Tuesday morning. It is July 8th, 2025. You're listening to EWTN. When we come back, we are going to be getting more information on the big, beautiful bill and what it means to our concerns as Catholics, especially from a pro-life and pro-family perspective, and defunding Planned Parenthood. Please, God, once and for all. We'll be right back. We appreciate your listenership. More Catholic Connection coming your way. July 8th, 2025. Great to be with you on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Great to have my friend Louis Brown with us. He's Executive Director of Christ Medicus Foundation, and we're going to talk about the BBB, the Big Beautiful Bill. Louis and I have known each other for a long time, and he's a Michigander. He comes from an amazing family. Let me tell you, they are all brilliant. His mom, his sister, And I'm so glad he's on our side because he's a tough cookie and does great work in D.C. and elsewhere. Louis, my friend, great to catch up with you. So let's get your perspective on this. I think there's been some really good questions raised about it, and there's some concern in the pro-life community about the defunding Planned Parenthood with the BBB, that it didn't go far enough. What are your thoughts on that? And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. As you know, I count you as a friend, but also just really, truly love your show. I think the one big, beautiful bill, which has got a memorable name, it really provides, this legislation provides a historic pro-life victory in defunding Planned Parenthood, taking away over $500 million from the abortion industry that has devastated poor and minority communities, has devastated the unborn, and has been devastating for pregnant mothers. The Planned Parenthood CEO said that they would lose $700 million in funding. The defunding of Planned Parenthood in this legislation will likely cause dozens of abortion clinics to shut down. It will likely protect thousands of unborn children from being killed, and will protect the health and dignity of thousands of pregnant mothers. So I am so grateful that we have this important pro-life victory. It's only for 1 year. It's not perfect. There's other really good things about the legislation. There's other things that really should be improved when it comes to the dignity of the person. But it's a great first step in restoring a culture of life and divesting out of a culture of death, divesting out of pro-abortion care, and starting to invest in pro-life care in our country, particularly in our tax dollars. And I think that's very exciting.
What else do you find really great in terms of the issues about which we're concerned? Of course, we're talking about life and marriage and family.
Right. So something that we put out two statements on this legislation, and something that I come back to, Teresa, is what St. John Paul II said in an exhortation, I believe, in the 90s. He said, above all, the common outcry which is justly made on behalf of human rights, for example, the right to health, to home, to work, to family, to culture, is false and illusory if the right to life, the most basic and fundamental right, and the condition of all other personal rights is not defended with maximum determination. So St. John Paul II is saying that unless we defend the right to life with maximum determination, the just, legitimate right to health and all other rights will totally be destroyed. So the most basic issue in this legislation is the right to life, protecting the right to life, stopping the intentional killing of unborn children and other vulnerable patients is a fundamental moral issue, and the government has an obligation to stop the intentional killing of unborn children. I believe that's what happened when we have this legislation, this law now, that has defunded Planned Parenthood. The level of government funding for federal health care programs, Teresa, has a moral dimension. It's important, but it is a prudential matter. It is not the same as fundamentally saying we're not going to give money to abortion providers. So I think that's the most important moral issue in this legislation. It overrides other concerns. At the same time, I think more needs to be done. We need to do a better job as a country to provide medical care, not just health insurance coverage, but actual quality medical care, particularly to people that are materially vulnerable, that are materially poor, that are disabled. So more needs to be done. There were a lot of reforms that the legislation did to Medicaid. I think many of those reforms, and we can talk about them, were good things. Some of the funding should have been increased, in my opinion, particularly to urban and rural hospitals to take care of the vulnerable in those areas, the poor in those areas. But when you get into the details of the particular reforms done to Medicaid, I think most people agree that they're pretty reasonable.
Yet the left is clutching their pearls and having an absolute fit about this, saying that it's going to really hurt people with Medicaid, and especially Medicaid, saying that basically it's over, that this is the worst thing ever. What's your response to what they're claiming?
Sure. No, I don't think that's accurate. The legislation in this one big beautiful bill, so-called, it enacts reforms to Medicaid that really ensures that the social safety net truly serves the poor and vulnerable. It also works to advance the dignity of work and to safeguard the financial sustainability of the program. So first of all, it requires states to do what is called community engagement requirements, such that Medicaid recipients who are physically able are now required to work, to volunteer, or to go to job training. It exempts people that are, exempts mothers with children that are under 14. It exempts pregnant women. It exempts folks that are not physically able to work or to volunteer or do the job training. But these community engagement requirements within Medicaid champion the dignity of work, and the goal is to empower people to move into professionally and economically upward mobile living. The legislation also seeks to root out fraud in ways by requiring states to take additional measures to make sure that the people that are in Medicaid are actually eligible. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's one estimate, Teresa, that says that 5 million people who are using Medicaid but are not legitimately eligible. And I think that's a real concern, particularly if we realize we can't pay for everything all the time. We want to protect the truly poor and vulnerable in providing the medical care. So let's do that. Let's safeguard the financial sustainability of the program. That makes a lot of sense to me.
It makes a lot of sense. I agree, and I don't understand. Well, I guess I do, but the left doesn't certainly want anything to be cut. I mean, they're all about government solving and running our whole lives and solving everything. But these are our tax dollars that are going for this. Why should we be paying for people who shouldn't be eligible? Nobody's saying to cut people off at the knees, and that's not what this does, according to experts like yourself. But it's very frustrating to me the way the left and the media especially portray this, because it's inaccurate.
No, I think it is. I mean, I took several hours just to prepare to make sure that I'm doing a good job of communicating to you and to your listeners about the legislation. I was in D.C. last week. I was on Capitol Hill. I was in the Capitol building. I had 2 great meetings, largely covering this legislation and talking about some of the details of it. And, of course, we know that we as a country need to do more to increase medical care for the poor, the vulnerable, unemployed, for single moms, working families who are struggling. We're not where we should be to have a true culture of life in our country. But it's vital that I think folks take a step back and look at what's happened over the decades. When what we have is, in part in the United States, is a pro-abortion lobby and their supporters that have been pushing for socialized medicine in the United States for decades. And their goal has been to expand Medicaid, use Obamacare, expand additional government programs to the point where we essentially have socialized medicine, a single national health insurance program. When that happens, when you get to a socialistic medical program nationwide in a country, generally in many countries, particularly in Europe, and we see this in Canada, that socialized medical system becomes a delivery mechanism for the culture of death. That socialized medical system starts forcing people to pay for and starts delivering abortions. It starts increasing euthanasia. People are unjustly denied care. And who loses most when you have a socialized medical system that is anti-life and anti-human dignity? Generally, it is the poor, it's the vulnerable, it's those that don't have material resources, it's minorities, and that's what happens. By way of example, Teresa, just a couple of weeks ago, a group reached out to me about a mother in Toronto who was at a hospital in Toronto. Her child is 7 months old and has Down syndrome. The child needs a liver transplant. The hospital won't qualify her for a liver transplant because the baby has Down syndrome. And
Louis, hang on. We're going to pick up this story after the break, hon, because I don't want you to get cut off. We're chatting with Louis Brown, an attorney, lecturer, and the executive director of Christ Medicus Foundation, a Catholic healthcare nonprofit. And we're talking about the big, beautiful bill, which he has studied extensively. More on this from Louis, and we come back. Wishing you a beautiful Tuesday morning. It's July 8th, 2025. Appreciate the great work and insight of Louis Brown. He's an attorney, lecturer, and the executive director of Christ Medicus Foundation, a Catholic healthcare nonprofit. He leads efforts to promote religious freedom and the dignity of human life, and was even appointed back in 2017 to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Service Offices for Civil Rights, working to enforce federal civil rights protections for patients. Okay, Louis, our satellite break got a little bit interrupted us in our conversation. You were telling us about the story of a mom up in Toronto. Finish that story because it sounded very compelling.
Yeah, it's really tragic, and the story illustrates what happens when countries go to socialized medicine. In those countries where we have socialized medicine, many of them, the national, federal, socialized medical system controlled by the government becomes a delivery mechanism for the culture of death. And what we have as a country, we have an obligation that our federal government, the state government, faith-based healthcare, the private market, communities, states, we all together as a civil society have an obligation to provide care for the poor and the vulnerable and to protect human dignity, but it doesn't mean that government has to directly pay for it. And so with this story about this mother in Toronto, as I was recounting earlier, her child is 7 months old. Her child's in the hospital. It's a girl. The child has Down syndrome and needs a liver transplant. And the hospital will not qualify her. My understanding is the hospital will not qualify the baby for a liver transplant, number one, but that the mother says that she is also being pressured to euthanize the child, to literally kill the child. And that is unthinkable. It is immoral. It's evil. But this is what's happened when you've had an erosion, an undermining of the right to life, of human dignity in their socialized medical system in Toronto. Not to mention the rise of assisted suicide, the rise of euthanasia in Canada, but also in countries, certain countries within Western Europe. You are just killing people for arbitrary reasons in the healthcare system. Some of their health systems have become killing fields as opposed to fields of healing. And so that's the danger in this country. That's why it's important that we have a strong social safety net to care for the poor and the vulnerable. But a person-centered, life-affirming, pro-life, human dignity-focused healthcare system that is free, that involves the entire civil society, and that's not dominated by the federal government because of our concerns, particularly about life and human dignity.
Yeah. In terms of, speaking of the continuing conversation on the pro-life cause, Louis, in terms of defunding Planned Parenthood for a year and shutting down, please God, several abortion facilities, do you think that will be, I know that the funding, that issue will come up again because it's only for a year, but once they close these facilities, with your experience, how difficult is it to reopen them? Because I would hope that this would really, put a nail in the coffin, so to speak, in terms of shutting these for good.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. It's important. The pro-life movement has been working to defund Planned Parenthood. I was talking to one Capitol Hill staffer. He said for 15 years. And on some level, the essential communication from some corners, my experience was from some corners of Congress, the effective communication was it can't be done. And there's all types of legislative rules on the Senate side that makes it difficult to do it, even in reconciliation because of this thing called the Byrd Rule. And it finally got done. We finally are starting to starve this beast that leads the culture of death in America. And that is monumental. The number of children that will be saved, the number of women that will be protected and safeguarded from harm is huge. And Planned Parenthood themselves, I've seen some numbers in some of these reporting to say that over 150 clinics could shut down in the United States. That is unbelievable.
Wow.
And so we have to celebrate this victory, but there's more to do. And some people say, well, we really wanted 10 years and it's only 1 year. Well, thank God we got to this point because some folks thought it just wouldn't be possible. And so it's important that we continue. It's important that we as a pro-life movement continue to divest out of and defund abortion and all other anti-life procedures and also transgender procedures that are harming children. And then we start to invest our tax dollars, our people, our institutions, our dioceses in a true pro-life healthcare ecosystem, a true culture of life. And I think that this is an opportunity to start that. And we have a political situation in our country that is encouraging that and allowing that and supporting that, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, and I think the attitude seems to be changing. I mean, the left just went so far to the left, Lewis. I mean, just swung so heavily. I mean, if you look at the surgeries, for minors and the things they were pushing in Maryland, the Supreme Court had 2 really good decisions in favor of families and parents and children. Do you think we're finally getting some common sense back here, maybe?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful. I think there's a political realignment happening in the country where at a minimum, people are more open to truth. It's not about, we're not trying to favor one political party over the other, but we want people, St. John Paul II said that, my understanding, he said that if he had one scripture verse that he could leave with future generations, he would have said, the truth shall set you free.
Set you free.
So I think, right, and I think we're looking at a situation where people that, supported things that advanced the culture of death, or that supported things that broke down the family, or that undermined religious liberty, they're starting to awaken. Even in places like New York City, even in previously very left-leaning anti-life areas of the country, you're starting to have voters. You're starting to have minorities. The case in Montgomery County where parents stood up against the attempt to indoctrinate their children in a LGBTQ, kind of formation. Those parents were primarily Catholic, Orthodox, and Muslim families, many of whom were from the Middle East or Africa, that stood up to protest, that stood up to sue the county of Montgomery County, Maryland, and they were only asking to be, asking to
opted out. Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and even the head of one of the teachers' unions, Randy Weingart, said that, hey, we need to make sure parents have a voice. So I think things are changing in the country. I think people are more open to truth, and I think that they're starting to question their blind allegiance to certain parties, to certain political figures, and that's important because we want people to pursue the truth ultimately, and ultimately we know the truth is the person of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Well said. Great way to wrap up the program. Lewis, thank you so much. Great to talk with you, and all the best to you and your growing family. Tell Krista we said hello and give your mom a big hug, and thank you for all that you do. Where do we find you online at Christ Medicus?
ChristMedicus.org. ChristMedicus.org. Thank you. So great to be with you. Hope to see you next month.
Okay, honey. Hope to see you back in Michigan. Lewis Brown, Executive Director of Christ Medicus Foundation, talking about the big, beautiful bill. You know what he was saying about people being open to the truth and people having their eyes open. We're going to discuss that with our next guest coming up, Nathanael Blake, who wrote a very powerful book from Ignatius Press all about how sexual liberation has not helped anybody. And so we're going to dive into that with him. He's going to be joining us up next. In particular, speaking of people getting some common sense, as Lewis mentioned, Stanford Medical halting sex changes surgeries for minors. Well, what do you know? We'll talk about that up next, and other stories making the news where people hopefully are seeing reality instead of inventing it. More to come. Lewis Brown's final points about the truth will set you free, quoting scripture and, of course, a favorite verse of Pope St. John Paul II. The truth of who we are, made in the image and likeness of God, male and female, you can't suppress it. You can try it. You can keep it down for only so long, and sooner or later it's going to come back up, and the truth is going to rise to the surface. And that's why I wanted to bring Dr. Nathanael Blake back on, because he has a fantastic book that really highlights so many of the issues that we discuss here on EWTN. Victims of the Revolution, How Sexual Liberation Hurts Us All. It came out in April, the end of April, early May. And it's an excellent book and has so much information for all of us in terms of what's happening in our culture. But there have been several stories, several positive stories. And I always like to bring in stories from the real world that show how the church is true. For example, we look at Doctor's book with all the information he has in there about how we were told for so many decades that we can do whatever we want with whomever and with our bodies. And yet the fallout from that, you don't have to be an expert, a theologian, a doctor, or anyone to figure it out. If we just look at what the CDC says every year, the Centers for Disease Control every year says STIs, sexually transmitted infections, are at epidemic proportions. Well, duh, if you promote sex all the time and tell people they can do whatever they want, what do you expect? But what do? They want to throw more birth control at it, which does not work. So anyhow, these recent stories should be encouraging because maybe finally people are, God willing, beginning to have common sense again. Dr. Blake, thanks for joining us. So I sent you a few stories. Well, let's look at the Stanford Medicine halting sex change surgeries for minors. What was your reaction when you saw that? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. And my immediate reaction is great. Without the past time, really, because we should never have been doing these surgeries. Children.
Okay, it sounds like we're having, Doctor, it sounds like we're all of a sudden having a problem with your phone. Maybe we can redial you real quickly or reconnect because it sounds like you're underwater, actually. Let's try it again. Let me see if I can hear you. Can you repeat your response? Oops, I think we're gonna have to try to. Okay, we're going to redial Dr. Blake. The book, again, is Victims of the Revolution, How Sexual Liberation Hurts Us All. It's from Ignatius Press. A little background for you before we get the good doctor back on. The book shows from within the damage that the sexual revolution has caused to our bodies, our souls, and our sense of joy. Quoting extensively from testimonies and reports written by the revolution's most outspoken advocates, Dr. Blake proves that even beyond the question of right and wrong, Christian sexual ethics simply provide a better way to love and to live. And Doctor, I was just reading a little bit of background about your book, but thanks again. I appreciate you allowing us to dial you. So again, your reaction to the Stanford story.
I think it's great. It's past time. They should never have been doing these surgeries on children. I am concerned that they're only halting these surgeries for minors and that they didn't say that they're going to stop doing providing children with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So it's encouraging, it's progress, but we aren't done yet because they are still trying to transition children to some extent.
Why do you think they're stopping with the surgeries? Why don't you think they're going further if they think the surgeries are a problem?
Well, I think it's because the pressure the Trump administration brought in, saying they're going to cut funding for any hospitals that are doing this. So clearly they are responsive to the threat of having financial sanctions imposed on them. And what that shows is that they don't necessarily believe this is good medicine. Instead, because if they really believed, they would say, no, we have to keep doing this. This is life-saving care and all that stuff they say. But instead, they'll stop it if they'll lose money over it.
So then this is proof, I would say, and would you say the same, that really this is, I learned in J school a long time ago, follow the money and consider the source. I mean, if you look at the money trail, and we know people who have these surgeries become lifelong patients, and there's a lot of money in this type of a so-called lifestyle in terms of the pharmacies and the physicians, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in it, and that has been a major incentive for them to keep going, is every child who starts down this path then becomes, as you said, a lifelong medical patient. They have to keep receiving something because their bodies have lost their natural equilibrium.
In terms of the testimonies, share with us with whom you spoke. There's so many different testimonies you have in the book that attest to being victims of the revolution. What did you learn?
So what I learned is that a lot of these people, and in particular young girls, are drawn into this usually because of trauma, because of early exposure to pornography, some combination of these things. And then it seems like transitioning, not being a girl anymore, is a solution to their problems. So I quote Chloe Cole. I've seen her talk a few times, and she's one of the more prominent detransitioners. And, yeah, she had surgery when she was 15 to amputate her breast, a irreversible, lifelong with surgery with lifelong consequences. And there are other girls, Layla Jane had these surgeries when she was 13. And again, these are girls who were traumatized or abused or otherwise unhappy. The social media tends to play a really large role in pushing this onto children, promising that, hey, you're an unhappy teenage girl, which unfortunately isn't uncommon. A lot of teenage girls struggle. But then it offers them the hope of a way out, but it's a false hope. It only hurts them further.
We're talking with Dr. Nathanael Blake, his book, Victims of the Revolution, How Sexual Liberation Hurts Us All. And although, as you mentioned, Doctor, quite correctly, that this story out of Stanford only going so far when it comes to this whole transgender agenda, aren't these examples that we can share with people? I think they are. That, okay, well, if this is such a noble thing, as you said, if this is so important, why aren't they pushing back? If they really believe that this is the answer, and doesn't this show that it's all about the money? And it gives us a chance to show just the fallacy of this whole movement.
I think so. It's about the money. It was also a lot of pressure, right? Activists were very insistent, and a lot of people believed, well, this is the next step in the sexual revolution. It was the next step in the gay rights movement and so on. And they supported that. They felt pressured to support this. And what I would hope is that as people recoil from the excesses of the gender revolution and just how bad it is, just how evil it has been to children in particular, that will give us an opportunity to reach people with the truth that, well, the rest of the sexual revolution wasn't so good either. There's a reason why we're hitting this part of the slippery slope. And yeah, it was a slippery slope. And that's because the premises were false. It rejected the truth about human nature, about how God made us, about how we are meant to flourish.
It seemed like maybe even 10, 15 years ago, we weren't even really talking about this issue of this transgender agenda. Where did all of this come from? It seemed like just a runaway train at some points.
Well, it was on the fringes. It was sort of tagging along, right? There was a very conscious decision to focus on same-sex marriage. And then once that was achieved, there was a switch. All the big groups that had been pushing for that, the Human Rights Campaign, for example, immediately switched over to the next part of their agenda. And I think they did that so quickly that a lot of people felt blindsided and lied to, really. And they were lied to. Americans were told over and over again that this is just about consenting adults. How will it possibly affect you? We're not interested in coming after your kids at all. And then suddenly the schools are teaching their children, you can be a boy born in a girl's body or vice versa. And parents are having this hidden from them by teachers and all of this stuff. And so, yeah, people were lied to and they're angry. And what we need to do is try to explain to them that this is the inevitable poisoned fruit of the sexual revolution. It didn't just start here. This is just the point where it got so bad that people's natural revulsion to this evil is really kicking in.
And the story with the Supreme Court recently deciding in favor of parents who fought the school officials in Maryland, where they were trying to expose children as young as 3 to these different books about, transgenderism, homosexuality, and then the different books that they were saying. And they tried to claim, first of all, they told them, okay, you can opt out. Okay, you can opt out, fine. But then they changed their mind. They switched in the middle of this, and the parents found out about it. And so they sued. They lost at the first level of their court fights, but then they took it higher, obviously, and won at the Supreme Court. But all the parents wanted to do was opt out. And the school said no. First they said yes, they said no. And you were talking about children 3 years old, and it wasn't just, as if that weren't bad enough, sharing these books, but it was engaging them in these conversations. And so it was grooming at a very, very early age. But when it got to the Supreme Court said no, parents have the right to opt their children out. I think exposure to that story as well has people now thinking twice about this.
I think so. And it exposes, again, that this whole movement is an evangelical movement, not in the Christian sense of Christian evangelicals, but in a religious sense of it does proselytize. It targets children to teach them its worldview, which is, of course, contrary to a Christian understanding and Christian truth and simply to the natural truth of who we are. Insisting that we can be somehow the opposite sex, that's superstition. That's like astrology or something. It's nonsense. So to convince people of it, you have to start early. And so naturally they start with children, teaching them that the basic human reality of our male and female existence, which we know is given to us by God, is false, and that instead there's a fluidity or a inner mutability to it. And they have to go after the children because their entire argument has been built on this lie of you're born this way, for your sexual desires. You're born this way for your gender identity, whatever that is. But that's not true. But if they concede that, they concede their whole premise.
So do you think we're making some progress here with people waking up to the reality or getting courage, Doctor, to speak back?
I think so. I think having the Supreme Court rule for us on these cases is good. I think, well, I wish the Trump administration would do more. They've done some good things, and those give people courage, and they give them a sign that, no, you're not isolated, you're not alone, you're not crazy, because so much of this has been driven by fear, that sense of cultural ostracization that people experience when it seems like all the world is going this one way. And it can be hard to stand up even when you know that you're right.
Yeah. But I think there's some real positive steps. And I really think having testimonies in your book is so important, because you can't argue with someone's testimony. And especially if you look at someone like a Chloe Cole and all these detransitioners, there are thousands of them that are out there telling their story and trying to give the proper information and the reality of the situation to people. So where can we get your book, Doctor?
You can find it at the Ignatius Press website, ignatius.com, as well as on Amazon. People prefer shopping there.
How's it doing? Do you know? It seems like it's gotten really great reviews on Amazon.
I think it's doing okay, but I don't know all the numbers, and maybe that's good for me to not be watching those too obsessively.
Yeah, I know. Once you start doing that as a fellow author, it gets addicting. You just got to leave it up to God and make sure you're getting it out there, because what you're doing here is like super important. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It was great talking to you the first time around, but I knew once I saw those stories that we had to have you on again. And keep us close, because all these stories that are breaking and developing, really, it's such a good, I think, evidence of what your book is doing in terms of educating people. Thanks, Doctor. Appreciate it. Have a great day and a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Dr. Nathanael Blake is a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and his new book is Victims of the Revolution: How Sexual Liberation Hurts Us All. Get a hold of this book. Take a look at the information in here. Take a look at the facts and the reality, especially if you are concerned, and aren't we all, about children and what the world is trying to do to our children. We'll be right back and let you know what's coming up in the second hour on EWTN Radio Extra. Stay tuned. Listenership on a Tuesday and every day. It's July 8th. It is summertime, and many people are taking vacations, or as we say here in Italia, vacanze. But sometimes when we get home from our vacation, we need a vacation from our vacation. You don't want to do that. I found this really cool story on the Vatican website. Advice from the popes, including Pope Leo, Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, JB2, on how we should be taking some R&R, rest and relaxation. I have my own thoughts on that as well. That will be our 2 cents segment in the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. And then it's a Tuesday, and that means we are going to have the Newman Guide News with the lovely Kelly Salomon talking about all things Catholic education. A number of stories we're following with you for that segment. It's actually 2 segments with Kelly on Tuesday. So do hope you can stay tuned for the entire second hour of the program. And don't forget EWTN.com. And check out the book from Dr. Nathanael Blake, because it's really, really important. It reminds me of my book, also by Ignatius Press, by the way, published by Ignatius, Extreme Makeover. I did that primarily from a female perspective, how women have been sold a bill of goods, but his book covers more than just women. I was doing it from a perspective of women, because so many women, including myself, were affected by the lies that were told to us over the many years growing up in the 70s and 80s. Which of everything happening in and around the Catholic world, hence the name of the program, Catholic Connection. We'll be right back. Hour number 2 coming up. EWTN Radio Extra. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tamio.
And we continue our Tuesday production of Catholic Connection, hour number 2 on EWTN's Radio Extra. We're so happy that you've tuned in. I think you'll enjoy the program, the second hour, as well as the first. Hopefully you're listening then as well. Coming up after the weather and the news this morning on a Tuesday as we move through this beautiful month of July, many people, of course, are maybe still in vacation mode because a lot of people take their vacations around the 4th of July for good reason, and especially this year because for the first time in 10 years, the 4th of July, or was it 12 years, I forget, fell on a Friday, which made for a really nice long weekend. But how are we spending that vacation? Are we doing too much? Are we just too busy? And then when we are done with our time off, we feel like we didn't take any time off at all. Well, I have some thoughts on that, related, of course, to our life in Italy and beyond, but also the popes have some thoughts on that. So more importantly, we're going to start with their opinions, including Pope Leo, who is at Castel Gandolfo right now, which is a beautiful town south of Rome, and it is above a beautiful volcanic lake, Lake Albano. It's in the hill country of Rome, and there's many beautiful towns and lots of gardens. It's just a very relaxing place, and so you can understand why the popes would use that. At least Benedict did, JP2, Leo. Francis decided he liked Rome better, so he stayed back in the Eternal City, to each his own. But Francis also talked about the importance of taking time off and relaxing. So we shall discuss in our 2 cents segment. And then, of course, it is a Tuesday, and that means Newman Guide News on Tuesdays with our very own Kelly Salomon from the Cardinal Newman Society talking about education. Even though it's summertime, many young people are preparing to get back to school. Many kids go back to school in August, and then, of course, we have college coming up as well. Before you know it, it'll be Labor Day. Flies by way too quickly. All right, weather-wise, we have scattered severe thunderstorms containing the potential for damaging wind gusts and excessive rainfall possible. That's from the mid-Atlantic to southern New England, with additional thunderstorms and heavy rain possible across parts of the plains and mid-Mississippi Valley. And then we have heat and humidity remaining along the east coast and interior northwest, while dangerous heat is building up into the southwest. That is a look at the weather and our rundown, as we say in the biz for today. Appreciate, again, your listenership. You are listening to EWTN Radio Extra, our second hour here on EWTN. Let's get started with the news. Over 100 people are dead after massive flooding sweeps through central Texas. This child detailed when he was alerted of the danger.
It was very late at night, so we had no idea what was happening until one of our counselors ran in and just yelled at everybody to get out as fast as we could.
And that is a young child who was one of those impacted by the floods, but he survived, thanks be to God. But in Kerr County alone, officials are reporting 56 adults and 28 children are dead, with 10 children and 1 adult still missing from a girls' camp. And again, we have officials that are saying hundreds of first responders are still working and searching and rescuing in the area. Camp Mystic confirmed at least 27 campers and counselors died in the flooding. The president, meanwhile, has signed a major disaster declaration for Kerr County. 2 sisters, according to Catholic News Agency, who attended St. Rita's Catholic School in Dallas, were among victims of the Texas Hill Country flash floods that have devastated parts of the state. The school confirming in a statement over the weekend. Now, Blair Harbor, who was 13, and her sister Brooke, who was 11, were vacationing with their parents and grandparents on the Guadalupe River near Hunt, Texas. The flash flood raised the river more than 22 feet in a half an hour in the early morning hours of July 4th, dislodging and carrying away their cabin in which they were staying with their grandparents. They were discovered in Kerrville, 15 miles from their cabin community, with their hands clasped together, according to reports. Their grandparents, Charlene and Mike Harbor, have not been found yet. In a statement, the school said that Blair and Brooke were the young women who had deep, deep faith, 2 young women of deep faith, and religion, they said, was one of their favorite subjects. On the night they died, they went to the loft of their cabin with their rosaries. Even in their last moments, they held tightly to each other. They said it was a powerful symbol of their lasting bond and their trust in God. The Archbishop of San Antonio, meanwhile, holding a memorial mass for the victims. That took place on July 6th at Notre Dame Catholic Church in Kerrville. And again, the president has declared that area a disaster area, and he also will be traveling to that part of the country. Now, if you'd like more information on that particular story in terms of this school and how it's affected and how other Catholic families are being affected, I just want to remind you to please tune to our many, many news outlets. Follow EWTN News Nightly. Make sure you check in with Raymond Arroyo. And also, please follow the Register as well as Catholic News Agency. Congressman Tony Gonzalez says the work won't stop until everyone is accounted for, but just getting to ground zero, he says, is proving to be difficult. Chainsaws teams from Texas Baptist Men, for example, are cutting through timber that was washed downstream. On top of that, they say the river levels are rising and falling as more rain is predicted upstream. A flood watch that covers all of the flood disaster areas has been extended for some time. And on Monday, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt scolded some Democrats for claiming cutbacks at the National Weather Service hindered warnings to people in the area.
Unfortunately, in the wake of this once-in-a-generation natural disaster, we have seen many falsehoods pushed by Democrats such as Senator Chuck Schumer and some members of the media. Blaming President Trump for these floods is a depraved lie.
Leavitt adding the weather station in the area had extra staff in place before the storm, and anyone who uses the issue to score political points, she said, should be ashamed. Again, she confirmed the president will be in Texas this week. Scott Pringle tells us a New Jersey man is being praised for his efforts in helping rescue scores of flood victims.
U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is highlighting the effort that 26-year-old Scott Ruskin has made as a U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmer. He's from Oxford, New Jersey. She says Ruskin directly saved 165 victims in what is his first rescue mission of his career. Noem says he was the only triage coordinator at the scene and that his selfless courage embodies the spirit and mission of the Coast Guard. Scott Pringle, NBC News Radio, New Jersey.
The coffin holding the incorrupt body of Blessed Pierre George Frassati, in other news, will be in Rome for veneration during the Jubilee of Youth. That's July 26th through August 4th. Now, Catholic News Agency is telling us, according to the Vatican Jubilee Office, a coffin will be transferred from the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin in the Italian region of Piedmont to the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva in Rome. Frassati, originally set to be canonized on August 3rd during the Jubilee of Youth, will now be declared a saint by Pope Leo on Sunday, September 7th, along with Blessed Carlo Acutis. Frassati's remains will be displayed in the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva in Rome until August 4th, so that they can be venerated by young people attending Jubilee events July 28th through August 3rd, when the Pope will celebrate the Youth Jubilee's closing Mass at a local university campus on the southeastern outskirts of the Eternal City. The young Blessed's relics were also present at World Youth Day back in Sydney, Australia in 2008, thanks to a request by Cardinal George Pell. Tammy Trujillo tells us the immigration battle between President Trump and California continues to escalate.
Border Czar Tom Homan told reporters there are plans to flood agents into sanctuary cities like Los Angeles.
We're going to double down, triple down on sanctuary cities. Why? Not because they're a blue city or a blue state, because we know that's where the problem is.
He says there are plans to ramp up worksite raids. The Justice Department previously announced a lawsuit against Los Angeles over its sanctuary city policies. Attorney General Pam Bondi said in a statement the city is flouting federal law by prioritizing illegal aliens over American citizens. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
President Trump says the U.S. will be sending more weapons to Ukraine.
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now.
He made the remarks at a White House dinner with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This comes after the administration had paused some weapons shipments to Ukraine over concerns a U.S. military stockpile was being depleted. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is nominating the president for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I want to present to you, Mr. President, the letter I sent to the Nobel Prize Committee. It's nominating you for the Peace Prize, which is well-deserved.
He announced a nomination at a dinner at the White House, saying Trump is pursuing peace and security in many lands, especially the Middle East. He told the president he sent the letter, as you heard, to the Nobel Prize Committee, and that he also hopes he should win and thinks he should win. Trump thanking the Israeli prime minister and saying the nomination is very meaningful, coming from Netanyahu. Mark Mayfield tells us a Los Angeles Police Department says a ghost gun was used to injure one of its officers.
The suspect who shot an officer during a foot pursuit in Exposition Park on Saturday had a ghost gun. Ghost guns don't have serial numbers, making them nearly untraceable. 2 uniformed gang enforcement detail officers believe that the man was in possession of a gun and tried to stop him for questioning, but he took off. The officer who was shot has non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect remains behind bars on $1 million bail. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And reportedly, there's no evidence that convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein kept a so-called client list. That is according to multiple reports that cite a memo on a review completed by the Justice Department and FBI after being ordered by President Trump. The review also confirming the disgraced financier died by suicide. Supporters of President Trump and some of his cabinet members had questioned the official story about Epstein's death in the past, and Elon Musk had claimed in a post on X that Trump was in the alleged files, but later deleted it. And Sean Diddy Combs' sentencing date could be moved up with a hearing later today, weighing that timeline. Last week, the rap mogul was found guilty of transporting people for prostitution, but acquitted of the more serious charges in his sex trafficking trial in New York. He remains behind bars and is set to be sentenced on October 3rd. In a Tuesday hearing, though, the prosecution and defense are expected to talk about moving up that date and also discuss possible sentencing recommendations. And the trash continues to mount in Philadelphia as a strike involving thousands of municipal workers is entering now day number 8. Some 9,000 union workers walking off the job last week, impacting trash removal and other services. And travelers at several airports no longer need to remove those shoes at security checkpoints. TSA begins testing a relaxed screening policy. An internal memo revealing the soft launch is now underway at airports including LAX, LaGuardia, BWI, Philadelphia, and Fort Lauderdale International. That's a look at our news in the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. As we mentioned, coming up in T's 2 cents. How's that vacation going? Have you planned it yet? And if you're still planning, are you planning too much? How about some advice from our popes, including the current pope, Pope Leo, but also Pope Francis, Pope Benedict, Pope John Paul II. Great article on Vatican.va about that today, and also have my own 2 cents about not needing a vacation from your vacation. No, not a good thing. You need to really relax. La dolce far niente. We'll be right back. $16 minutes past the hour, EWTN coast to coast and around the globe. We are on the internet, as you well know, EWTN's Radio Extra. We are on some 600 affiliates across the country. We're on shortwave. We're on TV. We're on satellite. We're everywhere. Thank you, Jesus. We try to be anyway, to keep you connected to the Catholic community and beyond. Okay. So I love this story on the Vatican News site. You can find it at vaticannews.va or Vatican VA and just go to the news link there, but it's easier, vaticannews.va. And the headline reads, How to Spend Your Holidays According to the Popes. And it has a beautiful picture of the town of Castel Gandolfo. And if you want to look that up, it's CASTELGAN Gandolfo, G-A-N-D as in David, O-L-F-O. And it is south of Rome. It is in, they call it the hill country of Rome. And as I was explaining on another radio program this morning, it's a lovely area. And what's great is if you are planning a trip to Rome, whether it be this summer or any time in the near future, if you need a break from the big city, and trust me, you will, this is a great place to go. It is close. By car, it's 30 minutes. There's also trains that you can take there. And it's just so pretty. Again, it is above a lake, the Lake Albano, which is it was a volcanic lake, so it's very picturesque. It's very dramatic because of that. And it's just lovely. In addition to having a pontifical villa and the Vatican Gardens behind it, it's just adorable. It has a cute little square. It has a beautiful church. It has, I think, the first, or I wrote about this in my book, one of the smallest post offices, or the first post office in the world. And then it has great restaurants and wonderful religious shops, and you just get away from the hustle and bustle. Okay, so Castel Gandolfo, south of Rome. This is where now the Pope Leo the 14th, is taking back this tradition of vacationing in Castel Gandolfo. So the story reads again the headline, How to Spend Your Holidays According to the Popes. As Pope Leo takes some time off at the Pontifical Villas of Castel Gandolfo from July 6th to the 20th. So that's 14 days. It's 2 full weeks. Vatican News looks at what past popes have said about holidays. A break from work to restore physical strength, a chance to travel and contemplate the beauty of nature, a time for reading and new friendships, or to meditate and pray. These are some of the aspects that past popes, the article says, have emphasized when reflecting on the importance of vacation periods. So we just mentioned that the Pope is taking from July 6th to the 20th off at Castel Gandolfo, and then he's also going to be going down there in a few more days, or for a few more days in August. And again, it's about 25 kilometers, about 16 miles from Rome, takes you with traffic and the different roads, takes you about 25-30 minutes to get there. How can one make the best of his or her time? That's a question that features prominently in many papal reflections, as holidays have an important role in human life. Again, this might be an article you can, download, maybe print up if you still like hard copy like I do, and just read while you're on your vacation, by the way. How can one make the best use of his time off? A question that features prominently again in many papal reflections. The Pope stressed that this period should not be viewed simply as a time of idleness. For example, vacation can instead be an opportunity to pause and reflect on the beauty of nature or God's book, as described by Pope Paul VI. He pointed out that during the holidays, we can rediscover the always open, always new, always beautiful creation. Nature with its space, atmosphere, animals, things, the sea, mountains, plains, the sky with its dawns, its noons, its sunsets, and especially its starry nights. Always deep and enchanting, Pope Paul VI said. For the Pope's, holidays are a time of rest and relaxation, but also meditating and turning toward God. It's a time of interrupting the ordinary work routine and can foster or should foster inner silence and reflection. I love that. During his Angelus on August 5th, 1973, Pope Paul VI explained what he thought this period of rest should look like. Let us ensure, he said, that free time, which we call vacation, is not entirely spent in dissipation or selfishness, relaxation, refreshment, recreation. In that sense, yes, but intelligent and vigilant. He suggested, for example, catching up on our reading that may have been put off or aside during the year, or taking part in excursions to discover the beautiful treasures of history and art. He also highlighted that holidays are a privileged time for good friendships, for getting to know places, customs, and needs of the people we do not usually approach, and for meeting new people worthy of our conversation. Pope John Paul II, who loves spending rest periods in the mountains, often emphasized that in order to regenerate themselves, people need harmony and the joy of meeting with others. He said, for a vacation to be truly such and bring genuine well-being, in it a person must recover a good balance with himself and others and with the environment. He said this during his Angelus on July 6, 1997. He added that it is this interior and exterior harmony wish that revitalizes the mind and reinvigorates body and spirit. Benedict XVI said, in nature, man can rediscover himself. During his Angelus message in 2005, on July 17th, in northern Italy, he highlighted the need to be physically and mentally replenished through a relaxing contact with nature. Moreover, he said, holidays are days on which we can give even more time to prayer, reading, and meditation on the profound meaning of life and peaceful context of our own family and loved ones. Looking at the stirring views of nature, he said, a marvelous book within the reach of everyone, adults or children, can rediscover their proper dimension. They recognize that they are creatures, but at the same time unique, capable of God, since they are inwardly open to the infinite. And Francis, in his audience on August 6, 2017, emphasized that holidays can also be a good time to deepen one's own spiritual journey, even while traveling between tourist destinations. Summer season, he said, is a providential time to cultivate our task of seeking and encountering the Lord. In this period of rest and disengagement from daily activities, we can reinforce our strengths of body and soul. He also encouraged the faithful to entrust their holidays to the Blessed Mother so she can help them be in harmony with the Word of God so that Christ may become light throughout our life, including our vacations. And see, this is the thing. We take a vacation, but we never vacation from God. Okay? And one of the most important points I try to make in all my work in terms of leading tours in Italy that I've been doing for almost 25 years now with my ministry, TravelItalyExpert.com, which I truly consider a ministry, where I consult people with their itineraries on Italy, and my book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders. Italy, like life, is meant to be savored, and that means your vacation is meant to be savored. So many people, and I say this in the beginning of the book, and we did this too in the early years when we first started coming here, wanted to get as many things off our bucket list, our Italy bucket list, as possible. What happens, brothers and sisters, is that what you see here in this country in terms of the architecture, the art, the beauty, the nature, it's so overwhelming that at some point, if you're doing too much, you are just going to shut down. Your mind can't absorb it all. So when you're on vacation, and many people do combine a vacation with a pilgrimage, which is fine, you make sure that in between seeing St. Peter's or St. Mary Major or the Colosseum or the Forum or the Catacombs or San Francesco in Assisi, that in between you do niente, nothing. And I mean nothing. Well, what does that mean? Well, have a cappuccino. Spend a lot of time having that cappuccino. Take a walk in a park in Rome or go to Castel Gandolfo. But listen to the advice of the popes. We need to refresh, rejuvenate, and we should never, ever need a vacation from our vacation or after our vacation. Hope you think about that. We'll be right back. Always great to catch up with our friend Kelly Salomon from the Cardinal Newman Society for our Newman Guide News on a Tuesday. So, Kelly, I immediately thought of you and the great work that you and the Society does when that story broke on that decision out of Maryland from the Supreme Court where parents have a right to opt out of their kids being indoctrinated and groomed. I mean, wow, what a big decision. What are your thoughts, and what was the discussion at the Cardinal Newman Society after that decision came down?
Yes, certainly good news coming out of the Supreme Court ruling in favor of parents in the LGBT curriculum dispute, that definitely that parents are the primary educators of their children. And so we applaud this decision. We're grateful for those parents, Catholic, Orthodox, Muslim parents who teamed up to bring this decision forward. And it's also a good wake-up call for Catholic families everywhere about what's going on in our public schools and issues to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, it really is amazing if you think about it, because all the parents were asking for was to opt out their kids. They weren't saying cancel everything, don't do this. They just wanted the choice to say, no, my kids are not going to be exposed to that. And then, first of all, they came out and they said, okay, fine. When they first came up with these horrible books that are indoctrinating kids, they said, well, we'll tell you when we're going to bring this material forward, and we'll let you know when you can opt out. And yes, you can opt out. Then in midstream, they changed course. And that's when all the lawsuits started to be filed. But all the parents wanted was the choice to say yay or nay to what their students were receiving in the classroom.
Right. And these issues come to deeply held religious beliefs. They were looking for opt-out coursework that endorsed the views that there are more than two genders, that a boy can become a girl, or that homosexual marriages are moral. And, of course, as Catholics, we need to make sure that our children are being formed in a proper understanding of the human person, of human sexuality. And that district had only permitted opt-outs in narrow circumstances, mostly related to sexual education in health classes.
So what do you think? Do you think this is going to set precedent? I mean, does it make a statement to other districts that are trying to do this across the country?
It definitely does. And it also shows us that these issues are being pushed in public schools, that Catholic families need to know that, there are teachers pushing things like there are more than two genders and that homosexual marriages are moral. And this has become a part of the curriculum and coursework. And so what's a Catholic family to do? Let's look at what other options we have available. Let's see if there's any way that we can make a faithful Catholic education affordable and accessible to Catholic families.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because if any case or story in recent weeks emphasizes the importance of a truly Catholic education, I mean, this one's got to be up there, right?
It sure does. I mean, for me as a mom, I think, wow, not only do I not want my kids to experience that in the classroom, but I want them to see the total opposite, the true beauty of the human person, and John Paul II's teaching on theology of the body and the vision of the human person from a really Catholic perspective. And so, these families are doing good work, making sure that others are aware that this is going on, that children should not be subjected to this in the classroom. But I think we, as a church, need to find more ways through a variety of models to make Catholic education accessible. Certainly cost is a big issue of why many Catholic families are choosing public education today.
Yeah, I know there was a story. I didn't have a chance to discuss this with you, but I was just reading it in some of the headlines that I was recording for the network. But there's a story that there are some Catholic schools that are merging because of lower enrollment, and Catholic universities actually, lower enrollment, and also trying to be more accessible to students and to making Catholic education at the higher level more available. Do you see that happening elsewhere?
Yes, we do. It seems like it's sort of a reckoning time for Catholic education. I mean, many Catholic colleges are closing, especially in the last couple years. More than 100 Catholic schools close every year. And so what we see is that families are being more and more drawn to where really faithful education is thriving. And so the most faithful schools and colleges are thriving. There's a growth in independent lay-run Catholic schools, a growth in Catholic homeschooling, hybrid models. And so I think Catholic education needs to be flexible and accessible. And we also need support in any way that we can, that every Catholic family can experience this. I know, Teresa, you and I have talked about the example of Father DeSalles. He's a pastor out in Virginia who provides scholarships to his parishioners to switch from a public school into one of the faithful Catholic schools in his area. And he doesn't have a school at his parish. He's just so motivated by the issues he sees in the public schools around them that he wants to do what he can to support Catholic families in good Catholic education.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a Tuesday, and this is our Newman Guide News segment with Kelly Salomon from the Cardinal Newman Society. Yeah, the report on CNA, it says a change is taking place amid a national trend of decreasing enrollment, which has affected colleges of all sizes across the country. Though some Catholic colleges, and this is your point that you just made, Kelly, CNA reports have continued to grow in spite of the trend.
That's right. College enrollment is down overall. Newman Guide colleges have grown 22% in the last 10 years, which is really exciting about the renewal that's taking place in Catholic higher education today. But unfortunately, many schools that have strayed from their mission, we see them closing, and we see that increasingly families are becoming choosy when it comes to both school and college choices, and they want to know exactly what kind of education and information their child will be receiving.
Has this increased in terms of the interest in knowing what's going on? Not that parents don't care, but many parents may trust more, not that they shouldn't be trusting, but may trust a little bit too much and not doing enough investigation into a particular school. Did COVID open the eyes of parents a little bit more to this issue, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. As students came home and parents were able to look over their shoulder and see what was going on in their coursework, in their lessons, I think many Catholic families became aware. I I've talked to some homeschool programs recently who reported that, their Catholic homeschool programs grew substantially during COVID, and they were able to retain many of the families even after schools opened back up because they saw the beauty of what Catholic education can look like. And stories like this one that we're discussing today, Teresa, I think make Catholic families aware of what's going on. It's, families are busy and there's so much going on. It's sometimes hard to keep track, but stories like this are really important to see that these books, like this Pride Puppy story that's being taught to preschool children, is just so disappointing and so important for Catholic parents to know.
There was the Pride Puppy book. There were two other, there were several books. There were two other books. One was about a little girl tending her uncle's wedding to another man. And there was another book about a trans student. My name is Penelope or something like that. And these students were as young as 3. So these are preschool kids as well as kindergarten and early education, early grade school. Seriously, what do you need? What does a 3-year-old need to see any of that for? Or a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old? It's just so ridiculous. Kelly, when we come back, we could talk more about that. But also, there was a Catholic mom. I'll see if we can dig up the video. I'd like to play it for you. There was a Catholic mom who did some great interviews on why she wanted her daughter pulled out of that program in Maryland. And her daughter, bless her heart, is a special needs child that was still being exposed to this nonsense out in Maryland. More with Kelly Salomon on our Newman Guide News segment Tuesday. We'll be right back. Having a great conversation, as we always do, with Kelly Salomon, our Newman Guide News segment on Tuesdays. And today we're talking about a number of issues facing education, as we always do. And we're highlighting right now that story that broke out of Maryland with the Supreme Court upholding a parent's right to opt their children out when their children are being taught things that are against their religion. This is such an important story. And also, I know it's in line with an email that the Newman Society recently sent out. But just getting back to the craziness of this all, we're talking about, and they were trying to claim, we're just reading them. They're just reading books, as if that, would be okay with the content, because it's not. But it was a culture that they were forming. They were trying to get the kids to engage in all these different conversations on these issues and talk about their words, their pronouns, and look up certain things online. I mean, it was definitely, I took it as grooming. What did you think?
Stories can be so powerful. How do we share our culture and our heritage with students? It's through stories. It reminds me of how Jesus taught through his parables, his stories, and how stories, when they are used well, can form the Catholic imagination, have a right ordering of the will and the intellect, share on our best stories from our entire culture. It reminds me of our Catholic reading list here at the Cardinal Newman Society, our reading guide for the Catholic reader that includes a wide variety of Catholic books. And how much better if they would expose students to these timeless pieces of literature rather than these modern stories that push these agendas like transgender agendas and pushes for same-sex marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can remember books in grade school, and that my English teacher wanted me to read, and some of them, they're just such classics. And to this day, I appreciate the fact that she taught me that. You know what I mean? It gave me a love for reading and a love for good literature.
Absolutely. Those stories they bring to life our Catholic imagination, and they lead us to truth, beauty, and goodness. I mean, what's better than reading C.S. Lewis, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, right? Or Little House on the Prairie series. There's so many great series and stories for our young children in education that could be shared with them.
Well, tell us, I know you sent out an important email to your followers and those who signed up for your e-blast. What was that about? And this is in relationship really to what we're talking about this morning, too.
Yes. So when issues like this come up, like the Supreme Court ruling in favor of parents over this LGBT curriculum dispute, the Cardinal Newman Society monitors issues like this, and we keep our Newman Guide school and college leaders informed on these issues and also any action they should take or any policies they should put in place to help protect themselves And so we put together a new newsletter called the Newman Guide Defender, and we scan legal, policy, and ideological issues which impact our Newman Guide schools and colleges. And this is just one of the benefits of becoming Newman Guide recommended, that you have the Cardinal Newman Society doing this work for you and providing the latest on these developments in various areas, from employment to government funding to accreditation to academics to students to religious freedom, essentially all aspects that could impact a Catholic school or college from these various sources. And so, the Supreme Court ruling in favor of the parents, that's one case we would highlight for school and college leaders so that they're aware of. We talked about school choice in their latest newsletter, including New Hampshire being the latest state to expand school choice.
Yep.
Offering grants for students to choose, Catholic and other faith-based schools. We talked about accreditation. There's this scandal at Columbia University where the Department of Education is challenging Columbia's accreditation because it embraces race-based policies and teaching, academics, etc., students, counseling issues. So it's just another great resource here at the Cardinal Newman Society, and a great encouragement, I think, to Catholic school principals across the country that we encourage and welcome you to apply for the Newman Guide and be kept in the loop on the latest going on in Catholic education and how to defend yourself from these threats.
Well, I think it's great because, as you said, we're all busy, and it's hard to keep up with all of this because this happens sometimes at breakneck speed, and it's like you're going to get dizzy trying to keep up with everything because there's so much breaking news and there's so many attacks on the good, the true, and the beautiful. So this is super important. I mean, you've got a couple of really good stories, several really good stories that are very recent. Ted Cruz, of course, Senator Ted Cruz introducing the Universal School Choice Act, proposing up to $10 billion annually in federal tax credits to support nonprofit scholarships that expand access to private education nationwide. Florida sets example regarding school choice programs, showing expanding such initiatives nationwide can strengthen Catholic schools and improve opportunities for low-income students. These are stories that we're not necessarily going to hear about because unless we are doing this 24/7, looking at news stories or, you know what I'm saying? Because it's tough. We're all busy and we like to keep up with the news, but we can't cover everything.
Exactly. And when it comes to Catholic educators as well, they're extremely busy focusing on the education of their students as they should be. But these threats are real, and the Cardinal Newman Society can help keep them informed on everything from school choice to accreditation to academics. We pointed out these issues going on with counseling. Right now, the Cardinal Newman Society joined an amicus brief in a recent case challenging a Colorado law infringing on constitutionally protected speech by imposing gender ideology on therapists. And so Divine Mercy University is one of our Newman Guide recommended institutions. They organized the brief, and it was signed by several other Newman Guide colleges, including Belmont Abbey and Walsh University. And we highlighted this for other education leaders because we're concerned about counselors and the importance of them being able to be formed in an authentic understanding of the human person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm looking at this story from Santa Clara University. A student in a graduate course on human sexuality says she was required to watch a sexual bondage video in class.
I found it.
What?
Yes.
I mean, come on.
And write her detailed sexual autobiography.
I it's very rare, as you know, that I'm speechless, but I don't even know what to say. This is what they're being, sad. This is what they're being exposed to. This is just unbelievable. And then you have politics over science. A Harvard professor stripped of tenure after falsifying data. Oh, that was an interesting story. I remember that story in multiple studies. Now, she's supposedly doing research on, wasn't she, ideological virtues or something, and yet she was falsifying them?
Right.
Or something. What was her field of study? I forget, but it was so ironic that she was falsifying what her research.
Yes, I can't remember exactly. It was ideological visions. And
wait a second, I'm
again,
pulling it up here. Yeah, but this whole thing though, it's so super important that you're doing this for people because people need to know this information so they can be aware of just what they're up against in terms of sending their kids to school when they go to college, right?
Yes, exactly. And what does faithful Catholic education look like? And what are you going to face if you enter classes at Santa Clara University, right? Here's an example of what we're seeing. Here's an example of what we're seeing in all of these religious freedom issues and how Newman Guide schools and colleges are putting into place policies to uphold strong Catholic identity, to defend themselves against these legal threats we see coming down the line so that they can remain faithful to their mission.
Yeah. Well, we found that clip of that Maryland mom, and it's 5 minutes long, but what I'd like to do is I'll just have Richard roll a little bit of it to hear from this Maryland mom defending her decision to join this Supreme Court lawsuit, and they were victorious in the District of Maryland, or the area of Maryland. And I want our listeners to hear this again, and Kelly, I'd like your response. We'll run about 2 minutes of it, and then you can give us your thoughts on it. So, Richard, if you could just roll it for a bit. This is a Maryland mom who was part of the case in the Maryland schools where parents were simply trying to opt their children out of LBGT agenda courses, classes for kids as young as 3, and the Supreme Court said they had the right to do that. Okay, roll the tape, Richard. Thank you.
Now with one of the parents who first brought this case in Montgomery County, Maryland, Mom Grace Morrison. Her attorney Michael O'Brien joins us as well. So Grace, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Montgomery County first removed the opt-out choice in 2023. You're a mom of public school kids in Montgomery County. Why did you bring this case?
I brought this case because my husband and I have an adopted daughter from Ukraine. She had been in the public school system for 7 years. She is a child with special needs. She has Down syndrome. And we became aware that in her special needs classroom, they were presenting books on sexuality and heavy topics of gender ideology, and we became very alarmed by this. Then to find out that we could no longer opt out of these materials, nor be even informed of what she was being taught. The books were being presented and discussed. So we had to make the very difficult decision to remove her from the school system, and that came at a great personal cost, and we have been walking through this case. So today we are really rejoicing to have those, by the Supreme Court, to have those rights restored.
So how much of this was because of your child's special needs, and how much was it because of whatever religious objections you and your husband might have?
For our family, this material was directly opposed to our religious beliefs. We are Catholic, and the things that were being presented were in complete conflict with our Catholic faith, and we were raising our daughter in the Catholic faith. So it was especially difficult for a child with special needs to not be able to understand why the teacher was teaching one thing and then to come home and be told something else. It just added another level of difficulty.
So I'm going to put up some of the books now. Let's show them if we can. One is about a puppy lost at a pride parade. One is about a girl attending her uncle's wedding to his partner, his male partner. Another one is about a young person discovering that they are...
Okay, Kelly, well, you get the message, but here's this mom. Imagine that. Her daughter, a special needs child, is being exposed to all kinds of things, and then she has to pull her out of the school because it's that bad. But thanks be to God, in the Supreme Court's wisdom, they realize that parents should have a say in what their kids are being exposed to in schools.
Absolutely. I applaud this Catholic mom for taking this into her hands. And one thing she said, no, my daughter's learning one thing at school and then the opposite thing at home. Right, that really stood out to me because as young people are learning and growing, they need that consistency. They need to know the truth. And I really applaud this Catholic mom. I hope that she can find a home in a good, faithful Catholic school that welcomes her family and her daughter. And I hope that her example really helps more Catholic families learn that gender ideology and other ideologies are being pushed even more, I think, than most Catholic families realize in public schools today.
Well, that statement is really what you're all about in terms of you're trying to raise them Catholic, and then they go to school, and that can be all lost if they're not protected or if you're not involved in terms of what they're learning. That's so important. Kelly, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. I wanted to get your perspective on that. So what else are you working on for the summer for the Newman Society?
There's always so much going on here at the Cardinal Newman Society. We're excited about this new Newman Guide Defender email that we're now sending out to Catholic educators across the country with all these latest threats and how educators can be prepared. And we're already planning for our fall college fair that's hosted online, Teresa. And so excited to share about that in coming weeks.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that soon. Kelly, thanks so much. Great to catch up with you. Kelly Salomon from Cardinal Newman Society with our Newman Guide News on Tuesdays. We'll be right back to let you know what's coming up on a Wednesday. Stay tuned. Now remember, if you're planning a vacation, make sure you don't have to take a vacation after you get back from your vacation because you're so completely exhausted, which too many people still do these days. I would suggest, and I'm not just saying this because it's my book, but if you're interested in learning how to relax Italian style, do pick up a copy of Italy's Shrines and Wonders because I talk a lot about how we had to learn to do this. Even though my husband and I are both FBI's, full-blooded Italian Americans. We still were raised and born in America, so we're very still American, and we're still adjusting even after 3 years of living here part-time. But the one thing we have come to appreciate is this idea of il dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. And I was telling Richard, and I think I mentioned this last week on the air, that we have not gotten the TV and we don't intend to get one. Our entertainment at night is looking out at the countryside or going to find sunflowers, which is very easy because they're everywhere this time of year in central Italy, or watching the birds, or watching our community group clean up the back of our little church here. They're doing a great job in cleaning up the yard and giving some new lights to the statue of the Blessed Mother, and just diving into the community and relaxing and don't always feeling like we have to do something. So think about that, and that cool article about the popes can be found at Vatican.va. All right, coming up tomorrow, of course, speaking of Italy, Joan Lewis joins us all about Rome, and we'll have Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, and Julian Greg Alexander all about marriage, mornings on marriage. Have a great Tuesday. Talk to you in the middle of the week. A domani.